Yeah, I mean, we can just talk.
Why don't you move that over there?
What is up? What is up, my fellow nerds and gangsters? All right, I just want to see if I'm getting all good here. I want to check to see if this is really working. All 0 of you who are watching right now. What's up? Can you guys hear me? Let me know if you can hear us. Hello there. Hello. Not now? You can't hear? Really? You can't hear. Okay, cool. All right, guys. So I wanted to have a little special treat for you. This is my dad. So, well, you can introduce yourself.
I'm Daniel's father.
All right. So his name is Steve, and he has been my biggest mentor when it's come to film for years, ever since I probably started doing wedding videos when I was 12. He's taught me more about filmmaking than any of the mentors I've had, past and present. He was a huge help on Vader. He would sit down and watch the edits with me and help edit and give priceless advice. And so I thought it would be great to not only field questions from you guys, but also, I'll ask him some questions. So a little bit of background about him. So he's been mostly in post-production, so editorial his entire career. He also directed a feature film. And when was it? What year?
I think, what was it, 2005?
2005. It was called The Legend of Johnny Lingo. And it was shot in New Zealand. And it had a cast member that a lot of you guys will recognize. Who was the big Star Wars guy?
Daniel Logan.
Daniel Logan. So Boba Fett was in the movie he directed. He played, what was his character?
Oh, he played...
like he was like a bully, right?
He was a bully. He played the king's son when he was at a younger age. The interesting thing is, you remember that he came over for dinner while he was here in the United States?
Yeah, he came over for dinner to our house one night, and he would talk about George Lucas and how he would show up to set in like tennis shoes and how surprised he was by that.
I don't remember that.
This billionaire director showing up in worn tennis shoes. But
what I do remember is that he took you and our youngest daughter, Natalie, in the backyard and taught you how to fight with lightsabers.
Yeah.
The real official way to fight on a Star Wars set.
Yeah, he taught us how to do like the one-handed cartwheels or the no-handed cartwheels that he had learned from Ray Park, because he does one with the double-bladed lightsaber as Darth Maul.
That's right. He met Darth Maul.
Yeah, they're good friends, I think, to this day.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty cool, having Boba Fett at our kitchen table. That was years ago.
Yes, he was. I can't imagine. I've lost track of him, but I can't imagine how old he is now.
Yeah, I know he has a kid even now.
Does he?
Yeah,
I haven't heard that.
Yeah. So let's see if we got any questions so far. Lego Maker 961 says, "Did you show your dad the Vader film when it was completed?" Of course.
I saw it. I guess I saw it in the first assembly.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw it all the way through the process, because every time he would come over on a Sunday afternoon to have dinner with us, I always would ask him to bring it so I can take a look at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we spent a few days just in addition to that going through it and giving great advice and having ideas. One of the coolest things, and I know I've talked about this in other videos, one of the coolest things in editorial is you can create moments that you didn't get on sets. You can create shots that you didn't get. You can do different camera moves that maybe you didn't do. And so one of the great things about him is that he was the unbiased second set of eyes. As a director, you often get so tunnel vision when regarding to your shots, where you fall in love with them, or you just don't see another way to do it because you've been thinking only about one way to do it for so long. But then you get a second guy in there who was not as intimately involved in the process, and he would see things, oh, just do it this way. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Well, it's storytelling, and there's more than one way to tell a story, but the art of editing is find the most effective way to tell the story with the material you have. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we were able to say, when Danny showed me the first assembly, I would say, well, why is he doing this? Why is that? Why is this? And he would have to explain it to me. And then I would think about it, and then we could make some suggestions and say, well, what if he did this? Or what if he did that? Show me what's happening here. And he would tell me this is what it was going to be. And I, not seeing what he had in his mind, sometimes I would be confused and think, wow, why is that possible? Or why is that great? What if we did this? And it kind of evolved. Not much from what you had, but things do evolve in editing, and that's the way good filmmaking works.
One of the things, he would ask me, as he said, ask me questions like, why is this happening? And oftentimes I'd have an answer, but there were some times where I realized, oh man, I don't have an answer for that. And so once I got over the initial pride of maybe doing something incorrectly, I'd say, okay, he's right. So let's figure out another way to do this. Because if I can't explain it, then obviously it's not working.
Well, you have to be subjective when you're in the editing room. You can't throw anything. We always say there's no bad ideas, and especially with the electronic editing, the non-linear editing. In the old days, when we were editing film, you actually had to make a physical splice in 35 millimeter acetate, and then you would have to splice them together with either glue or like they did in New York. But in Los Angeles, we used Scotch tape, not Scotch tape like you have at home. It was 35 millimeter film Scotch tape. And you never wanted to make a splice in your film, because when you projected it in a theater, it would bump when it went through the gate of the projector. And so now nonlinear editing, you don't have that. So you don't worry about making a splice anywhere. You try it, and you try 100 things before you land on the one or the few things that you're actually going to keep for the sequence or the scene or the movie.
I'm just glad that I don't have to edit in 35 millimeter. I would like to know how to do it, but I'm just happy I don't. All right, we got a question here. Let's see here.
Am I a fan of the Star Wars?
Yeah, and if so, are you excited for Star Wars Episode 9?
You know what? I'm excited over any Star Wars, fan films, anything. The thing my bucket list, and it's not just my bucket list, but it's also Danny's mother's bucket list, that someday we're going to watch all the Star Wars in continuity, back to back. I don't know how we're going to do it, when we're going to do it, but that's a bucket list for us.
Well, the sooner you get started, the less you'll have to watch. Hello there, Marana. Okay, so again, this is, if you're just chiming in, this is my dad. He's by far my biggest mentor when it comes to film. Has always been a huge, not only cheerleader, but help and guide in my career up until now, and from when I started doing wedding videos at age 12. So that Gold Taco says, does your dad like Chipotle?
You know what? I don't. I think I've only eaten at Chipotle twice.
No, it's blasphemy. Let's see here. So Juan says that he needs to watch all the Star Wars films with his girlfriend one day. Yeah, you do.
We almost made. Well, we didn't almost made it. Last weekend or the weekend before, TVS was doing a Star Wars marathon, and we actually saw about 2.5 of them back to back, and it just reminded us how important it was for us, or on our list, to sit there, and it just gave us that desire. We got to do this. We got to do this, because a lot of times I'm not really a Star Wars aficionado. Where I don't know, I've never read any of the books. I've only seen the movies. I remember seeing the first Star Wars film with my then girlfriend. No, I think we were married.
Well, as you're talking about that, tell us about what it was like to see the opening shot in theaters when the Star Destroyer comes over the screen.
Well, you really have to talk to your mother about that. She was quite impressed. But she, I want to just tell you what the experience was. It was at the Mann's Chinese Theater at the time. It was called the Chinese Theater. Now I think it's actually it wasn't even the Mann's. It was the Grauman's Chinese Theater,
which is it's on Hollywood. It's on Hollywood Boulevard in Hollywood. It's right virtually across the street from the El Capitan Disney Theater.
It's down the street from that.
Yeah.
It has the
handprints and the
handprints and the footprints of the stars in the bygone years in the front patio before you enter into the theater. we were in line, and by then it was a phenomenon. Somebody was saying, hey, you know, there's a little Star Wars film, and I was an apprentice editor in a commercial television house, and this guy came in, big guy, barefoot. His name, I believe, was Adam Beckett. He was one of the rotoscopers, I believe. Adam, forgive me if you're still alive and I'm misquoting this, but he was involved with Star Wars, and he came into our office and he talked about it, and everybody was just wrapped around him and just saying, wow, you worked on Star Wars, you worked on Star Wars. And I really didn't have that much of a clue because I was awfully busy. I would always work and keep my head down on the bench. But I thought, we have to go see this film. And when we went to see it, the line must have been about 6 blocks. And I think we were in block number 2, and the Grauman Chinese was a big theater, so we got a pretty good seat towards the middle, but a little bit too close to the front for my comfort. But we were in the middle, towards the front, not too far. But then what happened was, once it started, the audience, you can feel electricity, like you do in every Star Wars film. And all of a sudden, you know, this Star Destroyer just comes right out from over our heads. And it had the sound, and back then it was surround sound. It wasn't even 5.1 at the time, I don't think. And it just filled the room, and it shook, and your seat vibrated, because they knew what they were doing. They knew the effect they were trying to make. And everybody in the audience just screamed. It was electricity. I wish you were all there. I wish we had cameras to film, you know, video them. But it was just something that I've never forgotten. And when your mother tells the story, seeing the first Star Wars, that's her go-to moment.
Oh yeah, the opening shot. So I even did, if you guys haven't seen it, I did a whole video about the opening shot of Star Wars and why it's so cool. So check it out if you haven't seen it. Let's see here. Let's see here. All right, so Lego Maker. So first off, Juan says, I've seen footage of when Star Wars was still in theaters right in LA. It was crazy. Marana says, I wish I was alive when Star Wars A New Hope first appeared. Hey, yo también, man. Let's see here. Lego Maker says, most of my YouTube videos are done by Windows Movie Maker. I have Adobe Premiere Pro, but I don't know how to use it. Can you give me any tips? Well, I don't think either of us even know how to use Adobe Premiere. We both use a program called Avid Media Composer. It's the industry standard for when it comes to feature films. It transfers to film very easily because a lot of movies are still shot on film to some degree. And
well, Christopher Nolan still shoots on film.
Yeah, exclusively. Spielberg still shoots on film.
Right.
Quentin
Spielberg
Tarantino,
for the longest time would not even edit digitally.
It wasn't until War Horse that they edited it digitally.
And I remember that if he was producing something, he would allow it to be cut electronically because or digitally because the directors would want it. Mm-hmm. But when it came to his film, Michael Kahn, who I've worked with before, has always exclusively cut on film, and Michael's by far one of the best editors in the business, and one of the most nicest men I've ever met.
Yeah, I've heard great stories from him about Michael. One of the cool things, speaking about cutting on film, and we were just going back to it, one of the things I heard Steven Spielberg say once is that one of the reasons he liked to cut on film is because, like he was saying, when you made a cut on film, it was a commitment to have to, if you had to undo it, and there was always going to be a splice there. And so it was a big commitment to do that.
Well, you know, the interesting thing about cutting on film versus cutting digitally, as I said, digitally, you just try it. But with film, you sat and you pondered, and you literally, in your mind, you would review all the footage and all the performances, and you would say, I want to use take 3 for this line of dialogue. I want to use take 2 for this line of dialogue. And you would map it out in your head and the way you wanted to cut the film. And as soon as you figured out you had a good pattern, you would actually go and execute it. And it wasn't because you had a roadmap in your mind that you were going to cut it exactly by the dots. You actually did experiment because you would discover things. Mm-hmm. But the thing with digital, so you really had to map it out and intellectualize the way the scene was going to be edited, the way you wanted the performances, the character arcs, the way the characters were going to move and talk, and where you're going to cheat. And we did that in film because we didn't want to make that splice until we absolutely necessarily had to. But in digitally, you just try.
Yeah. Well, that's what Spielberg. What I was going to mention about Spielberg. He said he liked the idea of cutting on film because he had to think about it. You really had to ponder it. I think he even said, you'd have to go take a walk and think about it and come back and decide if you wanted to do or not. And so I imagine for him, that was part of his process to know that cutting linear or analog or film required him to really think about the film. I mean, I imagine that's what he was getting at.
I did a film very early on in my career, which was called Secondhand Hearts. It had Robert Blake and Barbara Harris. I think it was my first union feature. And the director was Hal Ashby, and he was a well-known director. He did The Last Detail. He did Being There. I worked with him on Being There.
Editor as well, right?
He was a film editor.
He was a film editor before.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest film editor turned director. Most likely, right?
Oh, there was Robert Weiss. He was before Hal. But, one of the tops in the late 70s, Hal did Coming Home, Shampoo, The Last Detail, Bound for Glory. Just a great director. And that's who we learned from. And I remember even in the Secondhand Hearts, going over to his house, and I was the assistant editor. In fact, I think at the time I was called the first assistant editor. And I would have to go to his house with a notepad, a 9x11 or 9x14 notepad, or 8.5 by 14. And we would look at 3/4-inch video cassettes in his den. And he would have all his dailies, and he had about 4 or 5 monitors. And he would say, I want you to start here. And then he would go through it, and he said, then cut to here. Cut to here, and I'd be writing this down. But he was such a genius at editing. He would say, hold on. So, and you would say sidebar now. He'd say alternate pattern. And then on the paper, I would have to go to the next line and say, okay, alternate, draw an arrow. And I would have these maps of how to edit a sequence. And I used to go there at 5:30 in the morning.
Oh, my goodness.
And I'd show up around 9:30 at the house that we were editing in Malibu Canyon because he had bought a house. And we were editing there.
Why not? Just buy a house.
And I would sit in the room with the editor, and I'd say, okay, here's the 12 patterns. And she would like roll her eyes. Okay, let's get started.
All right. So, I mean, just by hearing that story, you can see the amount of time and meticulous nature of film editing when you are on that professional level. So Juan mentions right here, I think the fact that right now you can just press undo and everything gets fixed has had an impact on the way you approach filmmaking, and not necessarily good or bad, just different. I think you're right. There's good and bad things about it.
I think it's
so Juan did our sound, by the way, for Vegas.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. Thank you very much for that. One of the things that look at, I'm an old timer. And when you think about what it was like in the past, I worked with guys like David Brotherton, or I didn't work with David, but I knew David Brotherton, who did Coal Mine's Daughter with Sissy Spacek.
Now, you may not have heard a lot of these movies, but they're all good movies.
You probably haven't, but if you like movies and you like character-driven dramas, those are good films to watch. And we learned from the masters, and it was an apprenticeship program. You had to be an apprentice, work your way to a second assistant, work your way to a first assistant before you even got an opportunity to cut film. And
apprentice editors don't even exist nowadays.
Yeah, and right now and we went from moviolas. In my lifetime, we went from a moviola, because I caught the end of the moviola era, and we went into a flatbed chem, and there was a moviola flatbed as well. And when we were editing film on those flatbeds, an assistant editor usually was in the room with the editor. And because we had to put roles, and we would build the roles like, here's the masters and the medium masters on one roll, and when he says roll, he literally means a roll of film. A reel of film. Yeah, a reel of film. It's a roll, but it doesn't have a reel around it, but it's a roll. And then we would have a character here, like Peter Sellers, and a character here like Shirley MacLaine in Being There. And we would have 3 different picture heads, and we would say, okay, we're going to start with the master, and then we go to Peter Sellers and say, do we want to cut to Peter first, or we want to cut to Shirley first? And we review all the performances, and then the editor would mark in and out here. And I think Michael Kahn does this to a certain extent on the
Sure
edit.
does.
And then he would say, pull that piece out for me, and I would be pulling that piece out for the editor. And while he was pulling that piece, and then he had a center head, and we would splice it together. You had to have two people in the room, and if you were an assistant editor working with an editor inside that room, and if he was a good editor,
I'd imagine you learned a lot.
Yeah, like Mark Warner, Don Zimmerman, and there was Edward Shulka Sr.
Both Academy Award nominees. Don won though too.
Don won for Coming Home, I believe. And you got a training. Now you don't get that anymore. There's no apprenticeship. What happens now is the editor sits in his room with the avid without any assistant, because no one has to put rolls up and down. No one has to extract film. So when you say good or bad, I kind of want to say that it didn't. If we had that program, that mentoring program, I think films would be far greater than they are today. I think there are things that we've lost in modern day filmmaking where, and I'm not saying this because I love the young editors. I worked with this young guy named Tommy Agar about a year ago. Fantastic editor, fast.
Very nice guy.
Terrific guy. Imaginative, looks at the performances. He gleans every bit a piece of the good stuff out of it. But they just try things, and they edit, and if they could cut the film upside down, and if they could get a reaction from you, they will.
So all this talking, it reminds me. So when I was at USC, I had a mentor there named Barnett Kellman, and Barnett Kellman, look him up. He's a multi-Emmy winner. He's mostly directed sitcoms. Actually started his career on stage, directing stage, and then went into sitcoms. But as you were an editor working on film, from what I'm gleaning from this, is that you really had to pay attention to what you were watching, because you kind of had to cut it in your mind first. And Barnett, in directing, he's like, directors, you essentially have to memorize the performances during each take. Like you have to, he's called it, turn on your VCRs and record it. Because when you watch a performance, you don't have time to go back and say, all right, let me look at it again to get notes. Like you have to be 100% in the moment with the performance, watching it, so that when you say cut, you can give notes immediately on multiple items if needed. Usually you only want to give one set of notes to not confuse actors. I think it says a lot as an editor, like an old school editor and a director, to really have to always be 100% in the moment, not getting distracted, because it makes you more efficient and effective in what you're doing.
Well, when you're actually editing, though, when you're actually directing, you have script supervisor, and we would all
Vader, we didn't,
and we would always see the script notes when the dailies came to us. We would get a set of script notes and other paperwork, and we would always go through those script notes, and there would be notes like from directors that would say, "Hey, I love take 3. I love this portion of take 3." And so when you're editing, you were trying to get in the mind's eye or the head of the director, and you wanted to make the film that they want to make. Being that they're the most likely, in the 70s, they were the auteurs mostly of the films, and that kind of started giving way in the 80s and definitely the 90s. That producers started taking over once again.
Producers.
And then they had the clout and the power, but it was when I started, I started in 77 or 79. I got in the union in 79. I started in films in 77, but it was a golden age for directors. You were making films, you were making art, and then when the 80s came, you were making films.
Well, I often call myself an entertainer, not an artist. All right, so
well, you have to be an artist because you have to be creative.
It's true. Okay, so again, guys, you can feel free to ask any questions. We're talking with my dad, by far my biggest mentor. Credits include everything from Cocoon the Return, Driving Miss Daisy, to the recent Power Rangers movie, Expendables.
My favorite. You forgot one of my favorites, Big Trouble in Little China.
Big Trouble in Little China. If you have not seen
Weird Science.
Big Trouble in Little China, you need to just go and rethink your life. Buckaroo Banzai. Oh yeah, that one.
Yeah, they're trying to make Big Trouble in Little China
with The Rock. Yeah.
And I want to work on it.
It'd be fun. So, you know, he's been around the block. Let's just put it that way. So one of the things, so again, if you have questions, feel free to chime in. One of the things that's, you know, on every film that he's worked on, or every film that I've worked on, he's basically been like a second set of hands on it.
Well, what
for everything? But
what happened to? I read your Avid article, and you were talking about the very first summer that you were.
All right,
editing.
so yeah, let's talk about that. So if you guys haven't seen, Avid Media Composer, or Avid, the company, did an article about Vader and about me. If you go to avid.com, go to customer stories, it's like the first one in there. It's a cool article. But in there we talk about, so when I was in my freshman in college, I directed a feature film. We shot on weekends. In total, it cost less than $1,000, but it was a big deal. I mean, it was a lot of work. Yeah, it was a lot of work. And it was like my first film school, essentially. Now, this was my undergrad. I didn't do film in my undergrad. I didn't do film until I went to USC and got a master's in it.
And I didn't send you to college to make a film.
Yes, you did not. But when I got home, I shot it all, you know, over the course of the 2 semesters, and got home, started editing it during the summer, cut it all together. It was done in my mind. I cut it all together. And then we looked at it. And
I remember coming home one day from work, and you said, "Dad, I'm done with my film." And I said, "Oh, well, then let's take a look at it."
And from there were a lot of notes. And I learned a valuable lesson, though, is that your first assembly is never done. Your first assembly is only allowing you to start editing. You just assemble it so you have it all there, organized. So that's when the real work begins. That's when you really begin to shape your character's arcs, your story points, your pacing. You can cut things out. You can move things around to adjust the characters. Do all of those things that make a movie. Honestly, all assemblies really suck.
Well, the first assembly is the launching pad.
Yeah, they're always really bad. I mean, I think Christopher Nolan even said that every first assembly, he hates watching them because he's always depressed afterwards.
Well, you know,
and that's Christopher Nolan.
I did not edit The Legend of Johnny Lingo while I was shooting it. And look, it's a $2 million movie. It's really nothing to boast about. But I remember we had, you know, a very anemic shooting schedule of about less than 3 weeks.
Which is really fast for a feature.
Yeah, it's really fast. And I had an editor, a New Zealand editor, who was actually a pretty capable young woman. And but when I saw the first assembly, and I was still in New Zealand when I saw it, I called up a friend of mine, Dick Pierce, who was a director. Double Jeopardy, among other films. No, that's Bruce Beresford. Dick did. What did he do with me? The Steve Martin, Leap of Faith. Leap of Faith. There we go. And I called him up and I said, "Hi, Dick," and he said, "Hi," and I said, "I just saw my first assembly," and he said, "Oh, Steven," and I said, "I don't know, Dick. I feel like I'm sick." And he says, "You know, every time I see a first assembly, I feel like I've been hit in the gut." And I said, "That's exactly the way I feel." Because when you direct something, you have something specific in your mind, and the editor doesn't have, they're not in your head. And the first assembly never lives up to it. No. And look, they're trying to put everything in the script in the movie. Which you should do. If you're an editor, the first time. The first assembly, everything goes in. You don't say, "Oh, this scene is kind of boring, let's cut it out." You don't do that. Don't censor the material. Just play it the way you feel like it should be played. You've got to have a good sensibility. Be a good editor. It's just not a matter of making things match. Yeah. I would rather take a bad cut to propel a story in a positive way than to make everything match. I worked on a film. Just real quick. So what he means by that, like making things match, is like continuity. Meaning that like maybe the character
turns a certain way, and you want to match the turn,
Match the action.
match the action.
Like if they're walking
it's
on
not it's not the priority.
If they're walking on their left foot and then the next cut they would be landing on the right foot. That's matching, and I do that. But what I'm really saying is that
well, can I give a story about that? So when Vader comes into the big mausoleum at the end, and the Storm Commander Fox comes up to him and says, "Lord Vader, welcome, Lord Vader." They start walking. There's a mismatch in the walk, but it's okay. I mean, I think the only person.
Did I approve that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we did it because it worked for the timing, and nobody's noticed
because there's time to dialogue.
Yeah, it was time to dialogue, and that's more important than trying to match the cut. Nobody noticed, as far as I know, except our sound guys who were doing the Foley of the feet. So of course they noticed. Of course they noticed. And Juan even brought it up to me. Juan, you probably remember this, if he's still here. And he's like, "There's a mismatch here. Do we want to? Are you okay with that?" I'm like, "Yeah, we're fine with it." But they were doing the Foley for the feet, and that's actually recording the footsteps. So of course they're going to notice.
See you later, Juan. Sorry, I just noticed that you just said goodbye. There's the thing about editing, and this is something that we picked up. You picked up on your first film, and also Shards of the Past, and every other film, is that there's rhythms, there's momentum that you try to create while editing. I think Shards of the Past is a good example of the pace, because when you first showed me the first assembly, it didn't have the pace. It wasn't cut tightly.
No, it was pretty slow.
And
yeah, the first assembly on Shards was pretty bad.
Well, you had the form, but it just wasn't rocking. And we tightened things up, and we sped a lot of stuff up. And I remember your visual effects artist complaining about that a little bit. They said, "Oh, do we have to do all these speed effects?" And you say, "Yes, of course, because that's what adds the energy to the film." Mm-hmm. And it's not like you have to add energy by speeding things up. But, with these digital tools these days, you can do it so effortlessly and so fluidly that you really want to utilize all the assets and all the tools you have available to you. That's the good thing about digital editing. And plus the fact that we don't have to work with film anymore is a good thing.
Yeah, I think one of the first assembly of Shards didn't have any speed effects or speed ramps. And basically what that means is a global, just the shot is 25% faster, or it starts off at like 120%, speeds up to 130%, and then back down to 115% during the course of the shot. A lot of the shots in the opening scene have a variety of those effects. One of the main ones is the shots where we're going in the opening clone trooper shot and the close-ups of the blasters firing. When he first saw that, he's like, "All right, we got to put a speed ramp in there to get the rhythm of the shots more organic and just better." And it made a big difference because it really because those pew, 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 kind of set the pacing or helped augment the pacing. And so little things like that, of course, are not going to make your movie great by any stretch of the imagination, but they're just one more tool that you can use to help augment the story that's already there. They're not going to make your story good, but they can really help the pace and just everything overall.
It's the energy.
Yeah.
And then you add Juan sound effects, and then you add your composer's music on top of it. It just is, once again, it's just that launch pad of letting everybody build upon it so that you can reach your goal, reach your aims.
So he's worked on a lot of big, huge action movies, and they do that in big action movies too, right?
So Lego Maker 961, I'm currently working on Windu, The Survival. It is a Star Wars fan fiction. Oh. What is that?
The Star Wars fan fiction is a written story by fans. So it's kind of like a fan film, but doesn't cost money.
Is it like a comic book?
It could be a comic book or just a story, a short story.
All right.
Cool. Let's see here. So Darth Thanos says Mr. Nerdherder, or Senior Mr. Nerdherder, isn't Star Wars Episode 3 an amazing movie? I like it. That's Revenge of the Sith.
Okay, I like it. Look, I have to tell you, boy, you're going to hate me for this. I love all the Star Wars films, but I felt those Ewoks were marketing.
Oh,
And
the
since
Ewoks.
and when I see them now, I now see the purpose of them. But the day I saw it, I thought, oh, George, what do? You weren't selling enough toys.
I know.
I'm sure the Ewoks weren't his biggest
I'm
sellers.
sure they weren't. I'm sure they weren't even a big draw. Although they did make 2 spin-off movies about the Ewoks, which I've never seen. All right. Let's see here. So that Gold Taco is live tweeting, apparently, the lines from the movie. Okay, so Joshua8476 says, have you started the casting for Window yet? For Mace Windu yet?
Is that the film you're going to try to do next?
Episode 2, yeah. Okay. No, we haven't. We're still waiting on a variety of things for that. Mostly we got to know when we're shooting to really kind of start casting. Stargazer says there is no escape. Quick trivia. There's at least 2 other movies, Star Wars films, where the line "there is no escape" is said. Which ones are they? And that was totally coincidental too. This is not on purpose at all. It really wasn't. Okay, so we'll let's see. We're at 35 minutes, so we'll wrap up here fairly soon. Let's see here. So one of the things that I learned on Shards of the Past from this gentleman right here is when you're editing, especially beginning editors and student editors, they tend to try to let the footage breathe a lot so that the audience can really like get emotionally invested in it. Yet it kind of does the opposite, because you don't want to give so much breathing room that the audience is waiting for something to happen next, or is getting one step ahead of you. Even.
That's right. It's called staying ahead of your audience. You don't want the audience to be ahead of you. And when you have those breathing moments, you might, and it's only because the director's in love. I remember working on a movie that the movie was about 3 hours and 17 minutes long in its first assembly. And we showed it to a well-known director, a famous director, and I won't mention his name. And he watched the film and he said, great, I really think we should release the 3 hour and 17-minute version. But when you look at the film now at less than 2 hours, it's really a pretty spectacular film. Wow. And it's done very well at the box office and for the studio. You really want to be ahead of the audience, because once the audience gets bored, they get bored. And it's
really hard to gain them back once they're bored.
And you really want to pick your moments when you want it to breathe. And those are the moments when you want the audience to feel it emotionally and let them think about it or marinate in it a little bit, only because it's devastating to them, or, you know, or it should be. Mm-hmm. Or it should be one of those thought-provoking moments. But yeah, don't give everything the same value of importance. Just pick your important moments. And make sure you play those moments, because those are the moments that the audiences are really going to remember your film for.
Yeah, so if every moment is ponderous, no moment is ponderous, because it's all boring. All right, so any other questions? So Predatorious Film says, do you plan on directing and working with Star Wars Theory in future films? Yeah, I am. As of right now, directing episode 2. Not currently, but will be directing episode 2 when that happens, and you know, hopefully the episodes after that. All right, let's see here. What is your favorite film? Do you have one?
Yeah, I like Casablanca.
Casablanca.
You know, I've had a lot of fights.
It's a Wonderful Life, I'm sure.
I love it. It's a Wonderful Life. I mean, those are sentimental. I'm kind of soft-hearted. I kind of like human interest stories more than.
Let us know if you've seen either one. It's a Wonderful Life or Casablanca.
More than, you know, action adventure. I'm not a big fan of. I mean, I like action adventure.
My mom's the action adventure fan.
Yeah, she's the Charles Bronson, Clint Eastwood,
John Wayne.
She's into that.
The James Bond. I think she's seen them all 37 times. Pierce Brosnan once came to USC, and my mother made a point of coming to see him.
But you want to know. This is the truth.
Oh, yeah.
I worked on I was an assistant editor on the pilot to Remington Steele, and we had brought
old TV show.
We had brought him from Scotland, I believe.
He's Irish, I think.
Is he Irish or Scottish?
I think he's Irish. But
Mary Tyler Moore Productions, who made the television show, brought him, and he was playing Remington Steele, and I was on the set, and I walked up to him and I said, Pierce, you know, I think you ought to try to play James Bond. I think you'd make a really good James Bond. And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, really? You think so?" And I said, "Oh, absolutely." I said, you're handsome, you have the charisma,
the hair,
the confidence. And I said, I wouldn't be surprised. And in literally like 8-10 years later, he's playing James Bond. I wonder if he remembers that moment.
I don't know, but I think Pierce Brosnan's my favorite Bond. Although I do love Daniel Craig as well. And
I love Daniel Craig.
Yeah, of course.
Sean Connery is my favorite because he started it for me.
Yeah. All right. So let's see here. Joshua 8476 says he's watched Shards of the Past like 50 times. Good job.
Good job, Josh.
Will you be showcasing the short fan film at Star Wars Celebration? I don't believe so. I do know a few conventions are going to be showing it here in the future. I don't know which ones exactly. Star Wars Theory would know more about that than I do. I do know it is showing in Rancho Cucamonga in May. Rancho Cucamonga is a town near Los Angeles. They have a huge Star Wars Day. It's one of the biggest in Southern California, apart from conventions, and they're showing it. I know Billy D. Williams and I believe Peter Mayhew were there last year. That's in May. I don't remember the dates off the top of my head. So let's see here. Fillmore Pocket says, if you're trying to make your first short, what's the best way to find an editor? That's a good question.
You know, I don't know the answer to that because there are good editors and bad editors.
I imagine Fillmore, let us know how old you are. It might help us to know how to answer that question.
Yeah, and you know what? There are a lot of assistant editors in Hollywood who have been around the editing process who are looking for opportunities to get things on their resume.
Mm-hmm.
I remember,
like most of the people who worked on Vader. You know, we just wanted something good to put on our reels.
And so I remember a friend of mine who was doing a short, and he does a short, you know, as a film class, and he wanted me to edit it, but I was already established, and I did do it for him. But and I've not done it since. I think you did it last year, Chet, with Chet and Darren.
Yeah.
But you can attract good people from Hollywood if you.
So he says he's 32.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
So you're doing something that's on the adult level. It's not like the Lego movies that Danny started with.
Yeah.
And if you put some kind of advertisement on a website looking for editors, I don't know where else you could put it. I don't know the sites that you would put it.
There's Craigslist, Upwork, Mandy.
Mandy might be a good one.
Yeah.
You might be able to get somebody who's going to be a pretty talented editor saying, "Hey, I'd like to have an opportunity to work on that."
Mm-hmm. If you have money to throw their way, that always helps.
You know, well, if you can pay them, yeah. But usually,
sometimes you don't have to.
You don't have to. But I know that when I go on IMDb and I'm looking up credits of somebody, I see even directors and producers. I see short films in their credits, and I see them fairly recent too. Mm-hmm. So I think people who are in the industry and love their craft, they love to do it almost on any level.
Yeah, totally. I'd say Fillmore, in addition to that, a lot of times, you know, if you are just totally experimenting with just making your first film, like you mentioned, it might be worth it to even hit up some of the, you know, if you're near a local film school and they got a program there, that might be a worthwhile thing. And the great thing is typically if they want to, they'll have one or two things at least to show you of something they've edited. And so you can, that's the best way to know
really
if they're good or not.
See their work.
Yeah. You got to see their work.
You know, Lego Maker 961. No, Danny did not work on a Lego movie.
No. I made Lego stop action movies when I was little.
Lego, when Danny was 5 years old, 6 years old, 7, I can't remember, but they made a movie making kit for children that gave you a stop motion camera. And he would do his Lego movies. He'd build a set with Legos. He'd have these Lego characters, and he'd move them frame by frame as he stopped, animated them, and they were pretty good. They were pretty decent.
They were fun.
And he that's how he got his interest in filmmaking.
Totally. All right, so
I'm gonna give Hayden one.
We got Tucker. Tucker is here. He's saying two of my favorites.
Who's Tucker?
Tucker from the
our Tucker.
Our Tucker.
Hey, Tucker.
All right, let's see here. What else we got? Favorite composer, says Timothy, says his are Hans Zimmer and Trevor Morris.
I work with Hans Zimmer. I work with Trevor.
So,
and you know what? I think you're right. I think there's some good composers out there. I think right now my mind is trying to discover the next great John Williams.
I think Giacchino's pretty darn good. He did Rogue One and the Incredibles movies and a variety of other films. I think he's real good. So Film Art Pockets, going back to the editor, how much is too much to pay an editor?
You know what? It all depends.
It depends on experience.
It all depends on what level you're trying to.
Some editors get paid $25,000 a week.
I know editors who get paid more than that. No, you know what? That's a hard question to answer, because for $5,000 a week, $10,000 a week, you could get a really good editor who will do it just as well as anybody else. Or you can pay $35,000 or more and get the top guns. Guys who are doing the Transport Michael Bay movies, they're getting top money. But they work for that money. They, a lot of hours, a lot of
very difficult.
Very difficult. The skill sets on those kind of editors, they have to know a lot of things other than just editing, compositing, sound effects. It's a big crew. They have to supervise, they have to coordinate, they have to almost post-produce. Those guys are worth every penny of it. And you look at a Michael Bay film and you say, yes, I can see it on the screen. Would I pay that much for a guy who's doing some simple drama? Probably not.
Yeah.
But you know what? Dramas are harder than action, because there's no cause and effect in drama. Like in a big Transformer movie, you shoot a missile, the next cut, missile flying, the next cut, the missile landing, exploding. I mean, those are cause and effect. The editing, the sequence of events are dictated by the action, where drama isn't. Drama is the subtlety and the art of communication. And you have to be able to glean and review the material on the film, and say, is this emotion right for this moment? How should he or she say it? And you're literally crafting the film as you're editing. And those things are a little more delicate than action. So I'm always, I'm not surprised when the Academy Award is given to the big action films, but I often think that the films who best deserve it are the more dramatic ones, or the comedy ones at times too, because
comedy's really hard to edit.
Yeah,
it's really hard.
And so, if it's showy, it's going to win the Academy Award. You just have to know that.
Yeah. So one of our mutual friends is an editor by the name of Brent White, and he edits virtually all of Judd Apatow's films and Adam McKay's films. Great editor. I don't know what his most recent film was, but like Talladega Nights and the Ghostbusters reboot, a variety of films.
Melissa McCarthy movies.
In the Melissa McCarthy movies. He's fantastic. But one of the things you don't realize in comedies is a lot of times, yes, there is a script, but a lot of times it's improv. Every single take is different. And he was telling me about how essentially every take is totally different. And so he, as the editor, along with the director, of course, they have to craft it all and combine them all together.
Well, you work on like a Ace Ventura,
or a Will Ferrell movie. I mean, every single thing's different. It's hard to edit those films. It's not easy, and it takes a special type of editor to do those.
Well, you have to be funny.
Yeah, you got to be funny too,
and you have to be smart, and you have to be able to say, how do I take these moments and make a story and a character out of it. And the better the editor, the better the movie is going to become, especially in comedy.
Yeah. So Stargazer says, I'm randomly here to support your work and channel, but has the overwhelming positive reactions and general hype overshadows the past. had an interesting, perhaps pending impact on your career with big studios? Well, first off, Stargazer, thanks for being here. Happy to have you. Second, I think, unfortunately, I have not been signed on to direct the next big Star Wars film for Lucasfilm. It's a shame, but what are you going to do? But it has had a good effect, and it's been positive. And I'm so happy that most fans really, really like the film. I did a very big director who you would all know, who you have all seen his movies, saw the film, really loved it. I went in and spoke with some producers of his. And so that was fantastic. And that was when I got that email to say, hey, why don't you come on in? I was like, whoa, pretty sweet, especially because I immensely respect this director. And like I said, you've all seen his movies. Let's just put it that way, especially one of them.
I think if you really want to be a good director, you got to keep on directing.
Yeah.
And every time you direct, you learn something new about yourself. You learn something new about how to present something. And every time you direct, no matter if it's a short film or directing a wedding video or whatever, you get something out of it, and it's just going to make you a better director. Here's a question: does the director have the final say? And this is from Ron Navy. The final say in editing. It used to be yes, and there's only a few directors that can garnish final cut. James Cameron being one of them.
Steven Spielberg.
I'm
sure Christopher Nolan does.
Yeah, no one's going to tell them no because they're so successful.
And they know what's up.
But usually when the studio puts up $100+ million, the studio gets to say what the final film is going to be like. But there's also a lot of different areas that you can test that. It's not like the studio is just going to arbitrarily say we like this or we don't like this. I think they're pretty smart at making films. They usually have what we call test marketing screenings or audience screenings. They'll recruit an audience either here in Los Angeles or they'll go to another city or another state, and they'll recruit an audience and they'll show them the film, and then they'll usually get about 20 to 30 people to stay afterwards, and they do a focus group, a question and answer period, and they have pointed questions about the film. What character do you like? Where do you think it was slow? Did you understand the story? Did you understand that, and they want to talk to you, things that you like and you didn't like, because they want to bring it back to the editing room. We'll read the cards, the questionnaires that the whole audience, not just the focus group, but everybody in the audience writes. And they want to know where their problems are. And they're not looking for one person who says, I can't stand it. They're looking for a number of people who are saying, we were concerned or we didn't understand this. And let's say 30% of the people didn't understand something, then that's really a trend. And then you say to yourself, well, what do we need to address that so that we can get those 30 people to or those 30% of those people to understand it? So you usually have about 2 or 3 of those because you don't want to have too many, because nowadays you run the risk of people videotaping them and doing all kinds of crazy things, which isn't fair to the people who are putting up.
And then the even bigger movies like Lord of the Rings, they don't have screenings because they don't want anything leaking.
Oh, no. And it's getting to the point where they won't want to have screenings anymore because of that.
Yeah.
And so you really have to, as a public, they really have to be responsible if you really want to continue to see the films that you're making, you're seeing, and that the studios want to make.
Yeah. So Tucker T mentions, he brings up a great point that we talked a little about earlier. Some of the best directors start as editors, Scorsese being one of them.
Yeah, we did talk about Robert Weiss and Hal Ashby, and who's others?
I mean, then you got editors/directors like James Cameron, Alfonso Cuarón.
Yeah.
A variety of others as well. I don't know if Iñárritu edits or not, but or Iñárritu, however you say his name. Okay, so Otis Wars Zoneo says, how did both of you get into filmmaking, and how did you know that it was what you wanted to do with your life? I'm a 4th generation film industry person. That means he is a 3rd generation. My great-grandfather, is this picture in here? I don't think it is.
My father was an optical effects lineup man and cameraman. And then my grandfather was at Paramount.
my great grandfather, he was a film archivist. Is that right?
Yeah, he worked in the film archives and stock library.
Yeah, and so from them, and I think I mentioned maybe in one live stream, his dad, so my grandpa, he did lightsabers for Empire Strikes Back. It was funny.
Did he do the lightsabers?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know.
And well, he didn't actually draw them. They actually had girls draw them.
No, he composited.
Yeah, they had girls actually draw the cores and stuff because their hands were steadier. But one of the things, he saw Shards of the Past, but he's never seen the prequels, and so he's like, Danny, I don't know what was going on.
Well, he's also like in his middle, the late 80s,
yeah.
And so, there's a thing that he just doesn't understand young filmmaking anymore.
Yeah, it's funny.
But
so I got into it though because, of course, I think him, and like you mentioned, I think the first things I started doing was Lego stop motion films, excuse me. And then I started doing wedding videos. I probably did over 20 wedding videos in high school. And that was kind of like my job. And from there, it was just, I think I wanted to do it since 6th grade or so.
I tried to talk him out of it.
Yeah.
And
I'm trying to talk my son out of it already.
It's film is changing. When I first started, they were making probably about 10 times as many films as today. And so once you finish a show, you'd go to another show. And now they're making fewer and fewer of them and spending more and more money. And because they're spending so much money, they're making fewer. So it gives younger people who really want to break into the industry a harder opportunity to do so. And I think, and I don't think we've discussed this, but I think you really have to start taking some chances on the type of material you direct. I think you have to have a point of view as a director.
Critical.
Absolutely. And I know your film, Change of Heart, one of your student films that got you and helped you get into USC.
Yeah, I did a video on it, so check it out if you want to see it.
And that was a politically charged film that dealt with an issue, about the
the Israeli-Palestinian conflict,
right? Which is a topical subject in the circles of education, upper education. And so I think that was a good film to do as your, as a demo to get admitted to a school. If you did a horror film, they would be able to study technique and how well you put it together. But when you do something that's really topical, there's been tons of directors who have made careers on things. Paul Mazursky in the 60s and 70s. You got Taylor Hackford, who is by far, in my estimation, one of the best directors when it comes to dealing with music. He did The Idolmaker. He did Ray was his last one. I know he's trying to get another one going, but if you have a point of view and you utilize those talents that you have, I think you're going to become the director that people are going to take notice and interest and say, you can pull it off. You've got a point of view. You got good, interesting topics. Let's give them a chance. If you're going to just do everything that everybody else is doing, I'm not sure you're going to find a place.
It's easy to get lost.
Yeah, I think so.
All right, so we got a few questions. Danny, do I watch Survivor? I have never seen one single episode of Survivor. Sorry. Le French Toast says, what were the first projects you two worked on? The first project I worked on, like professionally, was a video about something in Brazil. It was a little web video. It was the first video I edited. I don't remember what was the first video I assistant edited on professionally.
But you edited Christmas Eve.
Well, the first feature film I edited was called Christmas Eve, directed by Mitch Davis, produced by Larry King. And so I think that's on video on demand. Patrick Stewart, so Mr. Picard himself, Napoleon Dynamite, James Roday, Psych. And So we actually co-edited Cheryl Hines from Curb Your Enthusiasm. She's hilarious and such a nice girl too.
Yeah, married one of the Kennedys.
Yeah, recently. So we cut that together. But what was the first project you worked on? You remember?
Oh, my very first. I think it was with Hal Ashby. I started in commercials. Then I left that to become an assistant editor or apprentice editor with Hal Ashby. And then I became an assistant and first assistant, practically on the same movie because everybody was leaving.
It's a good way to do it.
But it was Hal Ashby. And I stayed with him for a number of years.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. That was before you were born.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Okay, so let's see here. Have you ever worked alongside other directors and actors? I assume this question's meant for you.
What is the question?
How many directors have you worked with? Do you have any idea?
I can't tell you. How many films? I can't even tell you how many films I've done. I don't know if I had to go over 40 or over 40 films.
I'd say easily. Let's see here. Ron Navy says, do you feel there's a loss of new creativity in movies nowadays? Seems like there are more remakes of old movies than new original movies. Ron, I think you're right. I mean, and I think the reason being is that remakes are safe. It's, when you're pumping in $200 million into a film, studios want to be sure they're going to make their money back. And so that's why they say, let's remake Aladdin.
Well, look at Aladdin is a big money maker. Yeah. They want to get that money again and again and again. Yeah. I worked with the director, and he's a famous screenwriter in Hollywood, and we did this picture together. And we would always sit at the kitchen table to have our lunch, and he would always say, "Steve, if I can get the people in the United States, just if I can get 10 million people to give me $1, I'd go make my film." And I would make my film, the one that he wanted to make, not the ones the studio wanted to make. So anybody who has $1.
Yeah. It's funny. Like, I think every studio executive, every director, I think every individual out there wants to do an original film. I'd say they would. If you could ask any person, what film would you want to make? That would be some of the original idea.
Well, look at a lot of people want to do Star Wars, and they want to do other,
I want to do Star Wars.
And they want to do Marvel films.
I want to do Marvel films.
And so, but there's a rare breed that says, I want to cut my own path. I want to make my own way, and I want to live by it or die by it. And because everybody has inside them some kind of expression, some kind of form of creativity that they want to express, and they want to get it out. And by getting it out, they start helping, or they start defining who they are.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's great about films. I think that's one of the things that have always attracted me about film, is that when I do work on film, and hopefully they're not the same film over and over and over again, but I get to work on different projects and different stories and different ideas with different people.
Let's see here. So That Gold Taco says, you worked on Napoleon Dynamite. No. The actor who played Napoleon Dynamite was in Christmas Eve, the film we
who was
John Heater.
I know John Heater, but who were the Rusla and Jared?
Jerusha and Jared Hess did Napoleon Dynamite.
Yeah. Which was a clever movie.
Yeah. See, that's a unique film. That's forging your own path.
See, that's forging your own path. But unfortunately, once you get in cahoots with the studios, they're going to keep your money.
Yeah. Let's see here. Soraya Small. Hey, Soraya. Or Lily. Hey, Lily.
Family.
So let's see here. Dalek Scientist says, this question is for Danny. Does Commander Fox being in charge of the past fit with his death in the comics? I'm pretty sure that he died in the arc after Vader made his red lightsaber. I don't think Fox was one of the dudes who dies. Pretty sure. I don't know. I know I asked Star Wars Theory if it was okay to make him Fox, and all the clones who were there, and they said, yeah, he'd be alive at this point. So I think it's fine. I hope so. Let's see here. Have you worked on any war films? You worked on any war films?
I don't think I have.
I mean, you worked on a few Expendables movies. Olympus Has Fallen.
Those are not war films.
I mean, those are just action movies. Yeah. But
I don't think I have.
Yeah. But I mean, of the action movies, Expendables, Olympus Has Fallen, Power Rangers. I'm sure there's others.
Action films.
Yeah.
Yeah,
a lot. Okay. War Inc. That has one in the title.
Oh, I did The Running Man.
The Running Man. The Running Man.
Yeah.
Old school Arnold Schwarzenegger in spandex.
That's right. Got a lot of one-liners.
Yeah, it's a cool film. Let's talk Star Wars. Hey, Mike, what's up, dude? Okay. Let's see here. Phone is dying, says that gold taco. Next time. All right. So, guys, let's wrap this up. Just as a quick recap, this is my dad. He is by far my biggest mentor that I've had in my filmmaking career. Mentors are absolutely invaluable. They bring experience, and the best mentor, of course, cares about you. But I think one of the best values of a mentor is that they'll tell you when they think you can do better. But not only do they say, I think you can do better in this, this, and this, but I know you can do better in this, this, and this, and let me help you to do so. And my dad's really helped me to see where I can be a better filmmaker, but most importantly, how I can be just a better person in life, a better dad, a better husband. And so he's a mentor outside of filmmaking too. And so definitely look for, it's hard to get mentors these days because everyone's busy, but I've had a lot of wonderful mentors that I know I mentioned a lot of them, and they're fantastic even to this day. But my dad has been, as rightfully so. I mean, it'd be sad if somebody else was a bigger cheerleader for me than my dad. So let's see here.
There's a question here.
There's one more question.
Do we need an education? I don't have one.
He didn't go to film school. I did. There's pros and cons. Check out, I made a video of, I think it's just called, Is Film School Worth It? That'll answer it probably a little bit more in depth.
I think it is.
So
I think it is. Here's my take on higher education and where I find it invaluable. After high school, you are who you are. When you go to higher education, you start understanding the world around you. You start getting those views about who you are as a person.
Start to think more critically, which is good.
You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to do some good things, but it's a more social environment. Mm-hmm. I think that helps prepare you for life, that you really don't get in this kind of like rut that you call high school.
It's like Let's Talk Star Wars says, it expands your mind. Totally.
It does. Exactly what I'm saying. But
definitely worth it to go to college, I would say. Or I mean, just any type of training.
Yeah, but
any type of training.
I remember you told me, because USC is an expensive school.
Too expensive.
And whereas his mother and I gave him his education in his university, but when it came to his master's, it was too rich for me. And so we kind of let him, him and his older brother dangle and try to make it on their own at that point, which they both have done successfully. And I remember he said, Dad, I'm spending so much money on the school. I just really don't want to go. You were wondering if it was worth it. And then, of course, you decided that it was, and you were going to stick with it. Mm-hmm. And I've said this before, I see the value of it. And I see what you know now. You would never have gotten that. You would have had to make 2 or 3 films to get that. And one of the things that I understand is that if you really want to go out and make films, stop talking about it. Go out and do it. Take anything you have, your phone, a camera, and just create a story that you can manage yourself, the film and light, or do whatever you want. Grab some friends, do something small. Put it together. You're going to learn.
Yeah.
And then you're going to say, man, I made some mistakes. I won't do that again. And then do something a little bit bigger and grow from the experience.
It's funny you say that. Last week, a really good friend of mine growing up called me up. He's like, hey, Danny, I have a business. Can you just come and help me film some videos of somebody talking and explaining our business? And it was literally a woman sitting at a desk just talking. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, sure, of course, I'll do it for you. And I got to say, I learned a few things doing it. It couldn't be the further away from Vader. Vader was months of pre-production and post and visual effects and sound and all this stuff, complex action and acting and all this stuff. And this person was just sitting at the desk. And, you know, you learn something every single time you make something, no matter what it is. And there's an old saying that says, only directors who direct. Meaning, if you want to direct, you got to direct. And like it says, it doesn't matter what it is. And fortunately, you guys, we all have, you know, cell phones that we can film on. And Steven Soderbergh has shot features on an iPhone. And there have been other features shot on iPhones. So it goes a great,
That's true.
a long, long way. Now, if you do shoot on an iPhone, be sure you get another microphone, though. I will say that.
And also, you got to have lenses for it. And you try.
But I mean, you don't have to. I mean, you can still make a film. I mean, but
you know what? Make sure it's a good story. Try to.
That's
make
the most important thing.
Yeah. Try to make it a good story.
The one thing that you get for free is story.
I got to tell you,
for free.
Maybe this is my parting shot. When he did his first film at those 2 semesters, we spent all summer editing it, cutting sound effects, putting music to it, color correcting it. A friend of mine color corrected it for us. And it was done. And I had in the file somewhere in my office, and I gave you a sheet of paper. You remember what it said? The 13 most common mistakes made by first-time directors.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
And what did you say after by reading that list? You remember?
I did like all of them.
Yeah. He read every one. He said, "Oh my goodness, I made that mistake. I made that mistake. I made that mistake." Don't do it on dark, dirty topics, because everybody does that. Do something that's unique, something that is going to separate you from the crowd. Don't do the dark, dirt project. Do something that's wonderfully creative and that has a point of view that somebody's going to say, well, I never thought about that, or I never looked at it that way, or those are the films that are really going to set you apart, because when he went to USC, he made that mistake already.
I'd already gotten it out of my system.
He got it out of the system, and I remember because I can't remember all the instructors you had, but I was friends with a good number of them. Yeah. You know, having worked with them in my career at some point, or knew who they were, like Tina Hirsch.
Yeah.
Wasn't Tina one of your instructors?
She's wonderful.
And I remember Tina grabbed me and she said, "You know, Steve, I can't believe your son, Danny. You know, he does this film, and it's like one of the most wonderful films that we've seen at USC." And this was at a screening, and I watched all the films, and I thought there was a lot of good ones, but there was a lot of dark, dirty stuff. And what she was really expressing to me was, he's a head and shoulders above because his level of maturity of filmmaking is beyond the other students.
This is what I mean when you need a mentor to think highly of you.
Yeah, but the thing is, don't do what everybody else is doing. Do something a step better, higher.
And do something you would want to watch. That's, for me, one of the biggest things that I realized is that if I make films that I would want to watch, I'm more passionate about them. I think they come out better, rather than trying to make a film that I think is going to do well, say at like a film festival or something. And so, all right, guys. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's wonderful to talk to you, and thanks so much for taking time, Dad. But you guys are awesome. Please share the channel. We've got almost 80 videos now. Share the channel with everybody, guys. All 17 of you who are watching at the moment. And let's make some magic happen. So, guys, remember to stay spiffy, and don't do anything we wouldn't do twice.